Welcome to Module 4, the claims process. And this one we're going to spend more time on today because this one can get quite involved. And this is where a lot of challenges tend to happen within the office. So let's look first at the claims process in general. What is the total that's going on? For those that are new, you kind of want to have a map of what happens. So as a patient comes to your office, first thing is you're going to capture their information, which happens over the phone. You're going to take that information from an insurance point of view. You're going to verify their eligibility and get a breakdown of benefits. Once you have the insurance info, the dentist sees the patient, codes out the treatment. Your team creates a presentation on that, depending on your ability to present, the patient or the dentist ability to kind of connect with the patient, your ability to present insurance. These all affect your acceptance, which is another course because it's just very detailed. Once you get the patient to accept the treatment that you're doing, then you submit the claim, whether it's electronic or on paper. If it's electronic, that claim is going to go through what's called a clearinghouse. It's basically your translation company between you and the insurance company. And once you get the claim back, you're going to get an explanation of benefits. And if you accept the assignment of benefits, the check from the insurance company, then you need to, or they're doing construction in my house, then you take that check and apply it to their ledger. If you have any challenges, you want to reprocess or appeal the claim after that fact. So just keep this in mind. That's kind of the total map. Now, going back to the beginning, and we'll kind of go through each of these steps. Capturing the patient data is probably the most important aspect of this because, like anything with data, garbage in equals garbage out. So if you fail on the first step of the process, the rest of the process fails almost automatically. And one of the interesting pieces of data is 73% of denials across the country are administrative errors, meaning wrong information, typed in incorrectly. So this is where that capturing patient data is so important because even being off by a letter or number, digit, is enough to make the entire claims process fail. So let's talk about a few data terms. For one, you got the member or the subscriber. Basically, this is the person who signed up for the plan who may or may not actually be your patient. You know, they're the ones who own the policy, like, for instance, a wife or a mother, and the patient may be the child. So the member and patient don't necessarily go together, but they could, because a member could be your patient. Next is your member ID or subscriber ID. The name is kind of interchangeable, depends on the company. This is the number assigned to them. So that's how you kind of track them. But keep in mind, a lot of companies also utilize as a secondary ID your social security number. Now, you've also got the group number. This is basically the employer number, whoever purchased the plan, or if it's purchased on the market, it's just that group plan. But keep in mind, the group number is different than the member number, and you have to have both because you've got to know which policy it's coming from, and then underneath that policy, what member goes with that policy. Now, keep in mind, with employers, not every employer has just one insurance policy. A lot of times they have multiples. And this is where you get subgroups, basically tiers of employees and tiers of different types of coverage. So for example, if you've got a group number that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hyphen 6, 7, 8, the first set of numbers is your group number. The second set of numbers is your subgroup number. And so if you tend to have these kind of little crazy numbers, realize that means there's probably multiple tiers to that policy. Now, the reason this is important, each group has a set of benefits. Each subgroup also has a set of benefits that are different than the original group. They may be similar in a lot of ways, but there's going to be some differences. For instance, if you have a large employer that has, executives and managers, and then your frontline people, there may be 3 different plans. The executives may have a slightly better plan than the managers, and the managers may have a slightly better plan than the frontline workers. And so you've got to know what the benefits are for each of these because the subgroups are going to be different. Now, when you capture the patient data, you're going to capture a ton of stuff, and it's all super important. Obviously, for clinical purposes and insurance, you want the full name and the date of birth because you're going to be using that all the time. But that's the patient's name. You also want the subscriber's name, date of birth, and their relationship to the patient, whether that's self, mother, father, spouse, whatever. You're going to want their mailing address, both the patient and the subscriber if they're at different locations. You're going to want the insurance member ID and group number, and subgroup number if there is one. You're going to want the insurance company name, phone number, address, and payer ID. Now, while that may seem weird, it's because many times insurance companies do not have just one location. And if you send claims to the wrong location, you're going to have challenges. You also have employer name and number, and this is kind of part of that whole get the group number idea. You got the group name if it's different from the employer, which it could be. And then always, always, always get the Social Security number. So this is the whole list of things that you will need from the patient, which is why our intake forms tend to be fairly detailed on patient information. Now, the challenges with this, like I said, insurance companies, some of them have multiple branches, multiple addresses, and if you send it to the wrong branch, your claim will not get processed. So for instance, Guardian tends to have two separate locations, one East Coast, one West Coast. And policies may utilize one or the other. So you've got to send it to the right location, which is why you need the insurance company's address, which usually is on the insurance card. Now, for patients who don't want to provide you access to data, whether that's their address, a social security number, whatever piece of data it may be, you can just say, hey, all patients, we're just not going to accept you if you don't. But I'm not a huge fan of just kicking patients out. I will tell them, look, I'm happy to do this if you limit the information you give us. However, keep in mind what that means. If they're going to limit the information you have to process their insurance, then the patient needs to pay you in full, day of treatment or before. You need to send assignment of benefits to the patient, and you need to not offer financing to the patient in-house. Big reason, Social Security number is how you track and kind of get collections. So if you ever need a collection company involved, they're going to really want that Social Security number because that's the best way to get money. So basically, never finance the patient if they're not willing to give you a full set of data. And waiting for insurance assignment of benefits is a form of financing. So again, no Social Security number means you're not waiting for insurance. The best way to protect your office. If you want, in the documents section of Dental Insurance Guide, you can actually download a sample of our forms. It has the waiver on there on if somebody doesn't want to give you a Social Security number and all the limitations that come with that. I can tell you after reading that, most patients who are hesitant about giving us information tend to give it to us. For those who ask or kind of demand and say, well, I have a number I don't need, or your insurance company doesn't need Social Security number, they're not entirely right. And here's why. If you're wrong on one digit or detail and you can't pull up the patient's information, if you have the Social Security number, you can't. It's always an alternate data point that you don't need any other data point for. So by having the Social Security number, you can also help with breakdown of benefits and verification. So it's super important to have, if for no other reason, when you need it. And of course, let patients know your practice management software stores it all securely. So if you want, go to the patient form section, and there's plenty of forms on there. The financial and insurance form is kind of the main one that has that waiver on there of, well, if the patient will or will not give you, Social Security number. Okay, so now that you have all the patient data, before the patient comes in, you're going to want to verify the data you have, and that's eligibility and breakdown of benefits. So when you first bring them on, you're going to verify their eligibility. Basically, you're going to contact the insurance company and check with them on what information is available. So this means you're going to check, A, is the insurance policy active? And by doing this, it allows you to check that your patient data you did collect is accurate, because if it's not accurate, you won't have access to the policy. And that can tell you, hey, there's a problem. Like, for instance, a big challenge that happens a lot is you ask for their insurance card, they give you one, you run it, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is medical insurance, not dental insurance. Happens all the time. Now, the big thing to think about with verifying eligibility, it needs to be done really every appointment 1 to 2 days prior. Now, of course, every appointment you're charging them. If you're doing a post-op and not charging, don't need to verify eligibility. But if you're doing something that has anything to do with insurance or finances or money, you need to verify every time because policies can cancel even within a month. Policies change all the time, so you've got to verify the eligibility. Plus, on the legal side, a lot of the states have laws that say if you checked eligibility within 1 to 2 days prior, insurance has less of an ability to demand a refund back for any errors because the states are starting to see that the errors are on the insurance company side and not your side. So again, verify eligibility every patient, every appointment 1 to 2 days prior. This is usually pretty quick and easy to do. Online, by phone, doesn't take long. Now, what takes long is a breakdown of benefits. A breakdown of benefits, you can get a small amount of data or a large amount of data. But to get true, accurate data, to do a lot of the things we talk about on Dental Insurance Guide to the effect that is needed, to give great estimates, to have no collections issues, requires a full breakdown of benefits. You're not going to get this almost with any portal or any kind of facts back. They just don't tend to give the level of detail we need. So what these are is you got to pick up the phone, you've got to wait for the insurance company, unfortunately, for sometimes 20, 30 minutes. And then you've got to go through the whole breakdown and get that information. As you fill this out, you're getting the full details of their coverage, all limitations, exclusions, everything we're going to be talking about here in a bit. And you're going to put it onto a form that's often called an IVF or an insurance verification form. I don't know why it's not called an insurance breakdown of benefits form, but that's the industry term for it. Now, the big thing about this, it takes a lot of extra time and effort, which means you're not going to do it very often. You're going to do it annually to get a full breakdown. Now, when you look at this benefits information, yes, you can get it from a variety of ways. The most traditional and currently the best way to do it, if you truly want full details, is a phone call. Pick up the phone, talk to the insurance agent, ask them all the little itty bitty normal differences on an insurance policy. And if you look to the right, this is an example of a insurance verification form or a breakdown of benefits. It is extremely detailed. It takes time to fill out, but having it saves you a lot of effort on the back end and with estimates. So it does take some time to do this. Whether you do it internal or outsource it is just a lot of effort. Now, you can get partial information from a fax back. Basically, call a company, go through an automated list, and then they fax you a couple sheets or one on at least basics of coverage. You might get maximum and deductible, but you're not likely to get the level of detail that's on the second half of this form, which is the breakdown of each individual code and all the common limitations to payment of those codes. Online portal works great too. Some companies have better online portals than others, and it's just which ones are kind of keeping up with the times. A lot of them are putting more and more effort into making the online portals better. So obviously some companies are better than others on this. Always try to get whatever information you can from online because it's helpful. Now, the fax back and the online portal, these are things you could potentially do every visit because they're quick, they're easy, they take a few seconds. But a true breakdown like you see on the right typically is only going to come from that phone call, with the exception of what's coming in the future. There are artificial intelligences that are being built to kind of get this information and gather it for you much faster, cheaper, better accuracy, things like that. So they're coming. Should actually be here fairly soon because I'm watching a couple of them to see kind of which one actually does what it's supposed to do at a level that is useful and worthwhile to stop making those phone calls. But in the meantime, you can look at this. I can tell you if you're watching this in 2025, feel free to reach out to me because by then we've probably already got an AI that works pretty well. But no matter how you do it, Basic idea is if you get all this information, you can save yourself a ton of time and effort and headaches on making sure your estimates are right and patients are treated well and you get paid, which is always important. Now, when you're looking at that breakdown, you're looking at a lot of different pieces of information. So things that are important to know, or at least the major things that are important to know. One is policy year. Now, a lot of people tend to think policy years January to December, and majority of cases that is correct. Most policies work on a year schedule. However, there are a lot of policies that don't. So many policies work on a fiscal year. As an example, April 1st to March 31st, your schools and a lot of your unions tend to do this just because that's their normal year. And insurance will give them kind of whatever policy year they want. But then you can have pretty much any policy year throughout the year. So the benefit period could be any 12-month period starting and ending at 365 days of that year. Now, usually they start and end at the beginning of a month, but the whole point is it is possible to have a benefit period that is not January to December or even April to March. So you always want to know this because you want to know this affects your maximums, this affects when the policy will and will not be effective. At the end of a policy year, you may need to change benefits because benefits can change outside of a policy year. They almost never change within a policy year, which is why the breakdown of benefits needs to be done at the beginning of a policy year. Next is your procedure categories, and this is probably the biggest aspect of it, is in dentistry, insurance doesn't just pay the same amount for every type of claim, it's going to pay based on groupings. So you've got your preventives, basically your diagnostic and your routine hygiene. Usually these are your D0,000 and 1,000 codes, kind of like we talked about in the prior module. These are the things that most often are covered at 100% or near 100%. They're the things that people need all the time. Then you have your basics, your fillings, your endo, your perio. It's usually paid a majority by the insurance company. The patient's out of pocket a little bit. And then you've got major, your crowns, your dentures, your implants. Now, that's the normal breakdown. The most common breakdown of these is preventive paid at 100%, basics paid at 80, and majors paid at 50. However, the reason you ask for these breakdowns is because it is very possible to have almost any number in these. I mean, we've seen 100, 190, we've seen 80, 60, 30, 90, 70, 40, literally any number you can think of. Even potentially a lot of times we'll see 180 zero that they pay nothing for major. And so you want to know these percentages because they're super important to getting you an estimate. And they change very frequently. Even though 180/50 is the most common, there are lots of variations of it. And then you've got to look at the common variations. So for instance, within the groupings, while normal extractions may be paid at basic, your surgical extractions and wisdom teeth can often be paid at major. Periapical x-rays that are diagnostic, more and more often, and this is probably the most common variation, are paid at basic. And then you've got your endo and perio, which normally should be basic, but a lot of times is fit under major. And so you kind of got to know where these categories fit, which is part of your breakdown of benefits, because it makes a big difference on what you're going to charge the patient. The other thing to think of, and we'll talk about this in a bit, your preventives typically have no deductible, but your basic and major almost always does. So for instance, if periapical x-rays now become basic, you're not just charging the patient, $5 out of pocket as a percentage, you're probably going to be charging them $50 out of pocket to meet the deductible first. So always keep that in mind. Next is what fee schedule does policy pay on? Now, of course, a lot of people don't tend to remember that this is an important thing to look at, and they tend to misunderstand what the terms mean. So let's look at the terms first. You've got office fee, which can also be called full fee. Unfortunately, the term UCR is often put under this category, but office fee and full fee is not UCR. UCR is not an office term, it's an insurance term. So you've got your office and full fee. That's what you know always. That's kind of the fees you set. Then you have UCR. UCR stands for usual, reasonable, and customary, which is an insurance term. Now, this is insurance's hidden fee schedule for out of network. If you're out of network, you know insurance will not usually tell you what fee schedule they're going to pay on. It's just going to be on their UCR. Now, their UCR, like I said, is hidden. They won't usually tell you of it. You've got to create a blue book to find out what it is. And if you don't know what a blue book is, go look at the blue book course and kind of walk through that. But UCR is based on a formula of averages. So they'll take the average fee that dentists are charging and then reduce it by some formula, and that usually becomes their UCR. Now, the reason it's kind of super important to know is if you're sending less than full fee on claims, you're ruining that average. And while there are a lot of insurances that manipulate UCR a lot, their reasoning always comes back down to the averages. So one rule to always know, always, always, always send full fee on claims. There is no reason ever to not send a full fee on a claim. That's what you always need to do, no matter if you're in network, out of network, and actually in network, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. Part of your contract is to submit full fees every time, no matter what you do. You can have a ledger in your office that doesn't show full fee, but your practice management software or your claims that go out always need to show your full fee, partially to help with UCR, partially help with secondary insurance, partially to not breach your in-network contracts. So lots of reasons for it. Now, in-network, this basically, what is your in-network discounted fee? If you're in-network, your sign-up process for this will give you the fee schedule. So it's not like out of network where you have to kind of go through hoops to find it or figure it out or calculate it. In network, they'll just give it to you and before you sign up. So this is always a known quantity. And then in network or out of network, everyone needs to understand MAC. MAC stands for max allowable charge. These are basically your cheap plans, your plans where the employer or the patient decide they wanted a less expensive premium option. And therefore, the insurance company said, okay, you're my client, we'll give it to you, but we're not paying as much either. Your benefits are lower. So it's a lower fee schedule than in-network. It's different from UCR and in-network. And it's just a smaller amount. Now, big difference. If you're out of network, you're still charging a full fee like normal. If you're in network, you're still charging your normal discounted fee, not your MAC discounted fee. And this can cause some potential errors because EOBs aren't always clear on this. So again, MAC plans don't affect what you bill in total. They only affect that the patient is going to be out of pocket more because the insurance is out of pocket less. And that comes down to downgrades because a MAC plan is basically a downgrade on the entire fee schedule. But the most common downgrades, and downgrades are listed or also known as least expensive alternative treatment or LEATS. There's a clause in all insurance policies, especially the ones that have lower premiums, that the insurance company acknowledges the treatment the patient's having done, but is saying that because of the policy, they're only responsible for a lower amount. And that lower amount is based on a different code. So it's not that they're changing your treatment plan, it's that they're paying less for it. So the dentist provides one treatment, like a composite filling, and insurance is paying for another, like an amalgam filling. The dentist still gets paid on the service that's provided. That's the most important thing, and it creates so many issues that people don't know that. You signed a fee schedule for a fee of what you did, not what insurance is listing on their EOB as what they're paying for. And a lot of times the EOBs are misleading. So keep that in mind. This is the biggest error that so many offices make that affect their budget a lot. So always, always, always get paid on the treatment you did. Insurance change in the code is only to just say we're paying less. Now, if you don't fully understand downgrades, there's a full course. Go watch it. It will make a big difference. And that's all we have to say about downgrades here because there is more information on the site. Frequency is the next one. So you've got to think about insurance is going to say, well, great, we'll pay for all this service, but we're only going to pay for it at a certain time period. We're not going to pay for it 10 times in a year because patients shouldn't need it 10 times a year. At least that's their determination. So frequency is a limitation on how often insurance will reimburse for the same service. If you repeat a service within the same frequency, you're going to get a denial. And there's almost nothing you can do about that denial. So, this is why the breakdown is important in getting the frequency info. Because, for instance, if you do a filling today and a year and a half later the filling needs to be replaced and it has a frequency of 2 years, insurance will not, no matter what you do, pay for that filling. So, you need to bill the patient. And just as important, not bill the insurance company. Now, the caution is frequency more and more in today's world is being invoked, even if the treatment was done on a different policy or a different insurance company. Comes up most often with crowns. So for instance, if the patient had a crown done in 2020 with Delta, and now the patient has Aetna, Delta or Aetna may still claim that crown is only 4 years old, and therefore we're not paying for it because our limitation is every 5 years. And therefore you're going to have that problem. So keep in mind, frequency more and more is not about the policy itself, but about the actual tooth itself. And that means if you don't calculate this right, you could end up with a denial that patients owing you money because you weren't aware of this. So again, think of the frequency more by the procedure itself and not by the insurance company, because that's where insurance is going to. Now, if you look at the top list, these are very common frequencies out there. So take a screenshot, use it, write your own. And that's super important. Your exams and x-rays often will pay twice a year or twice every 12 months, which is slightly different and affects things every 6 months, every 6 months and a day. So there's multiple ways they can do this for exams and x-rays and even cleanings. So you've got to know when they pay for this. Now, the other thing is, when you think about frequency, make sure if you aren't sure, assume the worst frequency. So for instance, your diagnostics, the best and safest assumption is book every patient out at least 6 months and a day, because then you never end up having a problem that you booked them 6 months out and you're a day early and then they don't pay, which is really horrible and hard to kind of justify to a patient that if they just seen you tomorrow, they would have paid. Your panos and FMXs, your large x-rays, usually every 3 to 5 years. Most fillings are somewhere between 2 and 5 years. Most crowns, 5 and 10. Full mouth debridement, which we'll talk about in other groups, should not be done very often, but is once in a lifetime because of that. Scaling and root planing and most of your perio services are usually once per quad every 2 to 5 years. So again, these are the normal frequencies that you will see. But you may have frequencies outside of this, and that's why it's super important to know each frequency breakdown. Again, if unsure, estimate the worst frequency limit. So for instance, if you don't know what the crown frequency is, it's always 10 years, because that's the worst that we've seen. Next is maximum. Maximum is where the insurance company is saying per year, per policy year, we're going to pay X amount. Doesn't matter how much treatment you do. You can do $20,000 in dentistry, but we're only paying for whatever that maximum is. Most common maximum in today's world is $1,500, which is kind of stinky because back 50 years ago it was $1,000. There's reasons for this that future courses will talk about, but the big thing is it is just the maximum. That is all they will pay for the year, and it's super important to keep track of this because if you've done, say, $1,400 worth of work, and you have treatment that still costs $500, insurance is not going to pay on the $500. They're only going to pay on the $100 remaining. Now, another important part is there are potential separate maximums that are differences, variations. Orthodontics tends to have a separate maximum almost always. And then occasionally surgery has a separate maximum, meaning you can get their wisdom teeth out. And even though they hit their max on their basic general dental stuff, they still may have a maximum for surgery. So just look at this because we've seen some policies that do that. The tip is large treatment makes estimates really easy because if you say you offer a patient a treatment of $5,000 in lots of dentistry, guess what? Do you need to keep track of how each filling pays and each crown pays? No. You just say, hey, look, it's 5,000. Your maximum is 1,500 minus whatever diagnostics we did today. The rest is your out of pocket. It makes things really simple to make treatment plans and estimates. So that's why it's actually, in a positive way, lower maximums kind of can help you be more efficient with the process. Now, waiting periods and age limitation. So waiting period is when the insurance company says, we're not paying for the larger expenses until a certain time period. Basically, they want the patient to have paid multiple months first. Now, in most cases, you're going to see waiting periods more on individual plans and a lot less on employer plans for various reasons from the insurance and employer's point of view. But the most common, if you do see waiting periods, is a lot of time basic is going to be 6 months and major maybe 6 or 12 months. I mean, those are what you commonly will see. Again, a reason why it's important to know the difference between what's considered preventive, basic, and major. Now, your age limitation works similar to a maximum, but not tied to a year. So for instance, the most common age limitation range for fluoride and sealants, your big preventives, is somewhere between age 12 and 18. So if you have a 19-year-old patient with an 18-year-old age limitation, insurance will not pay for their fluoride and sealants as they did the prior year. Orthodontics is the same way. Their max age limitation usually somewhere between 19 and 26. Now, there are some policies that pay for orthodontics with adults, but they're less common. So again, keep track of the age limitations. They help. Deductible is just like a medical deductible. It's annual. It's an amount the patient has to pay before insurance will pay for other things. Most common dentistry is, 25, 50, or 100, with 50 being the most common we see. But the other thing about the deductibles, they're not usually invoked for 100% covered services. They're usually only invoked for things that have lower than 100% coverage, which is most often your basic and your major treatment. So for instance, if a patient comes to you and gets exams and x-rays or cleanings that are 100% covered, insurance is going to pay the full fee, like the chart at the bottom, and the patient's paying nothing. The thing, though, is to think about with deductibles, they may change how you estimate. So for instance, if you have a filling, your fee is 200, therefore insurance is going to pay, let's say 120 of that. That's not 80%, even though, like we talked about, 80% is the most common. Correct. That's because insurance, if it has a deductible, is going to pull off that deductible first. So they're not going to pay 80% of the 200. They're going to pay 80% of the 200 minus 50, or the 150. And that's how you get to that 120. So the insurance on the first filling will pay 120 and the patient pays 80. But for filling number 2, the deductible is already met. So insurance will pay the 80% of your 200 again, and then the patient pays less. Now, the big important detail on here is, and people do math wrong a lot, if you notice the difference between what the patient pays on the first filling versus the second filling, even though a deductible of $50 is involved, is not $50. So again, it's just how the math works. You pull the deductible off first, and then you figure out the percentage. You don't figure out the percentage first and then pull the deductible out of that number. You'll get a little fuzzy and wrong math. Now, the other thing to think about is that there are individual deductibles. A lot of times, policies will have family deductibles. So you've got to think about, if you've got a family of 4 and the deductible, say 150, and you've seen 3 of those patients for service that needed their deductible paid, that 4th patient, 4th family member, won't have a deductible anymore because they're already met the family maximum deductible. So keep that in mind too, is there's an individual deductible and sometimes there's a family deductible. Now, pre-existing conditions, as a lot of us know in medical, pre-existing conditions have kind of been pushed out by the government, not seen as normal or healthy or whatever. But in dentistry, they still exist. You've obviously got your frequency limitations, your crowns, your dentures, things like that, which are basically pre-existing conditions. What was there before the policy was invoked? But then you have the most common pre-existing condition, which is what's called a missing tooth clause. And this is where if the patient had the tooth removed before the current policy, then the policy will not pay for replacement of that tooth. So for example, if you have tooth number 19 that's missing, the lower left first molar, and you've got a broken number 18 and a healthy number 20, and you want to do a bridge to replace number 19. If there is no missing tooth clause, then the fact that 19 is missing insurance says, okay, we'll pay for the bridge no matter what. It doesn't matter if 18 or 20 are broken or not. But if there is a missing tooth clause, insurance is going to say, we will not pay for the bridge on 19. We're only going to pay for the restorations on teeth that need the work as individual units. So in this example, if there's a missing tooth clause and you have a broken number 18 that needs a crown no matter what you do, and you do a bridge, number 18's crown will get paid, the abutment, and then the pontic and the other abutment on numbers 19 and 20 will not be reimbursed. So this is kind of how you gauge how you are going to estimate that treatment, is you've got to know, is there a missing tooth clause? And therefore, will it pay for each individual tooth or not? And then you have finally your miscellaneous clauses and your exemptions. So miscellaneous clauses could be good or bad. You could have a progressive plan. The most common progressive plan, and these aren't very common, but the most common progressive plan is every year, the maximum goes up a little bit because the insurance company has basically pulled in more premium and not paid out as much in claims. Great. So you may occasionally see, year one, the maximum may be lower than year 2 or 3. It kind of goes up with time. Now there's typically a maximum at which that max will hit, but you do have a lot of plans that are progressive. Now, the exemptions are the little itsy bitsy details that full breakdown of benefits is designed to get you. So for instance, occlusal guards, the most common exemption for these is they only pay for them for osseous surgery. So if the patient hasn't had perio surgery, then they're not going to pay for the occlusal guard, even though it's a quote covered service that's only covered after osseous surgery, which means if the patient hasn't had osseous surgery, it's not a covered service, which goes by non-covered service laws. You should watch another course for that. And, insurance is just not going to reimburse. The most common exemption by far is cosmetics. It is extremely rare for insurance company to pay for cosmetics. So veneers on healthy teeth or, paying for bleaching or anything like that. Now, do some policies? Yes, I found one policy that's paid for bleaching. I found a few policies that'll pay for veneers, but most policies don't. Now, they typically come with the rule that's even more specific that says they don't pay for things like abfraction, abrasion, erosion, attrition on crowns and fillings, no matter what. And this is actually probably more commonly an exemption than not an exemption. So for instance, the easiest way to think about this, and this is just as important for the clinician dentist to know as it is for the admin team, is insurance, got to think of it, is designed to pay for infections, decay, acute trauma, but not designed to pay for most anything else, like chronic trauma or bruxism, damage over time, which is this list of things: abfraction, abrasion, attrition, and erosion. Many times insurance will not pay for those. Doesn't mean you can't do them, just means you shouldn't involve insurance when you do them. So we've talked about the coding or the verification breakdown. When you take that, you're going to code the treatment, you're going to present to the patient, you get acceptance, you do the work, now you're going to submit the claim. So you have paper claims, which thankfully most offices don't use these anymore, but if you still use paper, great. I highly suggest getting electronic. You'll get paid faster. It's easier. You know how to fill out the form every time. But if you're electronic, which is a majority of the industry right now, you're going to use your practice management software to connect to the insurance company through a clearinghouse. So we're going to talk about clearinghouses, but you're also going to talk about how you handle attachments. Electronic attachments can be handled by a couple different companies. The most common one by far is NEA, National Electronic Attachments. Basically, you upload your files to this, which are stored in the cloud. And then on the claim form, you actually send the NEA attachment number. And thankfully, most practice management softwares will automatically do this for you. But you attach the number for that file, picture, x-ray, whatever it happens to be, with the claim. And so the insurance company, when they get the claim, sees, okay, well, we have the claim form, but we don't have any attachments. I see a number, I'm gonna go to NEA and look at that number and get the data. So that's how this tends to work electronically. Now, for some quick tips and just quick searching, I did this in about 10 seconds. I looked up, how to sign up for NEA if you're not already signed up. Well, there's multiple ways that you can get signed up for cheaper. GEHA happens to have one of them. You don't have to be a member of GEHA, but if you want a code and you haven't signed up for NEA yet and you need to, go use the code. Save some money. But again, this is just free little things you can do online. Just pulled it up today, in 2024. So the code's probably going to be effective for a while. Okay, once you've submitted the claim in your side, you need to deal with the clearinghouse. So the clearinghouse is basically a look at it as it's a translator. So your office and your practice management data treats data in one way, and yet the insurance company treats it in a different way. So the clearinghouse is the entity in between you're going to send that data to translate it from your data to the insurance company's data. Now, the thing that makes this interesting is that we speak English, or at least people watching this usually speak English, but the insurance company speaks a different language. Now, these are computer languages and data languages, but they're going to speak something different. So while you speak English, Delta may speak Spanish, Aetna may speak German, Blue Cross Blue Shield may speak French, Guardian may speak Arabic, UHC may speak Italian. In terms of computer languages, you need to translate your data to something they can work with. And that's what the clearinghouse does. So you almost always need a clearinghouse with electronic claims. Actually, I don't think there's a way to do it without electronic claims. Your kind of normal clearinghouses as of 2024 kind of are listed here. These are the biggest ones. Now, the thing to think about at the bottom, Availity.com is kind of Blue Cross Blue Shield's version, but it's also a cheap, free, in most cases, way to file medical if you ever have to file a medical claim. Most common being if you do wisdom teeth, the dental policy requires you to file medical first to get that denial to submit dental. Well, I don't know about you, I'm not usually wanting to pay to submit medical. So if you use Availity, then that's one option for you. And like I said, it's free. Now, it's not a great software, so hopefully you won't have to file medical very often, but at least it's there. Now, that's kind of the claims process. We're going to talk about at the end, when you get that money or that claim back, what you do with it. That's going to be the next module, where we talk about explanation of benefits, your assignment of benefits, and then how to deal with appeals and reprocessing claims. But at least that hopefully gives you a breakdown of the general claims process, what works, to give you a framework and a overarching idea of kind of how the process works, so that you know where you are in the process. I don't know about you, it usually makes more sense to me to see the bigger picture. So that's the end of the module. It's for the admin team. I will answer questions. If you haven't typed it out, go ahead and type it. I've got a few here to answer. Okay, so question is for COBRA plans. When you say you collect in full from the patient, you mean UCR office fees, right? It's a great question, and no. If there's a COBRA plan and you are in network with that plan, you're collecting the full in-network fee. Basically, all the COBRA thing does is say, I'm not going to accept assignment of benefits because it is too easy to get scammed. It's too easy for the patient to make a mistake. The patient needs to accept assignment of benefits, which, yes, you can do when you're in network in limited situations like COBRA or secondary. You don't have to accept assignment of benefits from secondary. And so keep that in mind. You're still in network if you're in network, and therefore you're collecting the full network fee from the patient. COBRA doesn't allow you to just be out of network. Next question, with COBRA plans, what if you are in network with that plan? Can you refuse to take assignment of benefits? Yes, you can. Again, limited situations, and that is one of the limitations, because it's so easy for the patient to cancel the policy even before the insurance company is even able to process it. So it's happened so many times, just don't put yourself in that situation. Okay, if you're in network, does that require you to take the discount plan? Does it require you? It depends on the insurance company. It's a great question. So the question kind of more distinctly is, if you're in network with, say, Cigna, and Cigna has a PPO and a discount plan, do you have to be in network with both? Depends on the company. Some it's required, some it's not. I will say, if you are willing to be in network through the insurance, there is absolutely no reason not to be in network with the discount plan because it's the same fee schedule, just with a whole lot less effort, time, no claims, you get paid today. And there's so many benefits of a discount plan over insurance. So again, if you're looking at whether you want to sign up for both, always sign up for the discount plan with it because there's no reason not to. And if you're going to drop something, drop the insurance plan before you drop the discount plan. Um, we have some patients that have brought the cards in. I'm not sure if we were required to take them. Again, if you're in network, I would just say take them, even if you didn't sign up with them or not. Again, because they're easier patients to deal with than those who have actual dental insurance coverage that may have some reimbursement. Okay, next question. Do you know any reason why the x-rays are sometimes considered at major? I don't see that very often, but it does happen rarely. So x-rays required at anything other than preventive is all about the premium. So again, if the insurance company goes to the client, the HR department says, your premium is $50 a month. And the employer goes, well, we want a less expensive premium. Can we do 40? Insurance companies can come back and go, okay, we'll give you a lower price, but keep in mind that's lower benefits. So as the premium costs go down, the amount of benefits go down too. And this is why you tend to get these alternative variations in benefits like periapical x-rays not being paid at 100%, is because the employer or individual policies, the patient, decided to pick a cheaper premium. And the insurance company's only goal is to satisfy their client. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, barring any other questions, I hope this has been highly helpful for a lot of you. We'll have more courses on the basics coming up, so keep track of that. And then I wish you a great rest of your month.